Hello everyone, this is Papa Likes Comics with another video. This time around, I have a pre-code horror book to unbox. And we're going to briefly look at the era of the early 1950s and the impact it had on comic books. Stick around.
Tales from the Crypt.
I want to first talk about a book that I just finished reading called The 10-Cent Plague, The Great Comic Book Scare and How It Changed America by David Hajdu. So Hajdu is an American journalist, author, professor, and music critic who's written several books and biographies. I found this copy at my local library, along with this book, Foul Play, The Art and Artists of the Notorious 1950s EC Comics by Grant Geisman. So Geisman is a jazz musician and author of books about Mad Magazine and EC Comics.
In this comic book is a love story, a boy and girl in love. They get married, and after an offensively lurid description, illustrated of course, of the couple's wedding night, the book shows how the bride murders her husband by chopping his head off with an axe. This comic book describes a sexual aberration so shocking that I couldn't mention even the scientific term on television. I think there ought to be a law against them.
For those of you not familiar with comic book history prior to the creation of the Comics Code of Authority, here is a quick backgrounder. In the 1930s, comic books in the US were a medium considered very low on the scale of entertainment, cheap and disposable. You had newspapers and radio. Television was just starting out, and owning a TV set was out of reach for many American households. Comic books were a main source of entertainment for kids, and over time, public hysteria surrounding the influence of comic books began to form. Psychiatrist Dr. Frederick Wertham had been researching children's behaviors and in 1954 published Seduction of the Innocent, and thus was born a theory that since juvenile delinquents were reading comic books, therefore, comic books caused juvenile delinquency. Dr. Wertham's studies caught the attention of church leaders, teachers, parents, and politicians who embarked on a crusade that led to Senate subcommittee hearings in 1954 about comic books.
It is my opinion, without any reasonable doubt and without any reservation, that comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency.
The Comics Code of Authority, formed in 1955, was an industry group of publishers that basically self-censored their material in the name of self-regulation. This was their seal of approval printed on comic book covers. Now this video cannot go into every detail about pre-code books, but I encourage you to visit the links in the description of this video to learn more about other materials and references. And now for the unboxing. Oh wow. Man, this is nice. This is Strange Mysteries issue 10 that is referenced in Seduction of the Innocent. The reason it's referenced is that it shows an injury to an eye, but since this book is slabbed, encased, I can't actually see what they're referring to. I was bidding on a book that was graded 6.0, but it got pretty high in dollars, so I had to settle for this 3.5 that I paid about $310 for. You can see the cover. This woman surrounded by these ghouls running in fear. And much like the style in those days, they would draw the woman's front and they referred to her bosoms as headlights.
Oh, beat it, boys. You bother me.
My next unboxing is this massive book that weighs like 25 pounds and is published by Taschen. The history of EC Comics is the story of Bill Gaines, who inherited EC Comics in 1947 after his father, MC Gaines, passed away. Over the next 8 years, Gaines and his writers and artists, including Al Feldstein, Harvey Kurtzman, and Wally Wood, would reinvent the essence of the comic book with titles like Tales from the Crypt, Weird Fantasy, Crime Suspense Stories, Weird Science, Two-Fisted Tales, and Mad, that was published first as a comic before switching to the magazine format. This is a big-ass book. Let's see how I can open this up on the camera. Wow, this is, oh my God. Oh. Jeez. All right, so this is it. The history of EC Comics. Wow, this is beautiful. This is really, really beautiful. So these were the early stories that EC Comics was publishing. They were publishing biblical stories. And that's MC Gaines right there. And now we enter the era of when Bill Gaines took over for EC Comics. Books on crime. You have Moon Girl, romance comics. There's Two-Fisted Tales. Here are the beginnings of Mad Magazine. Here's an ad for the first issue of Mad Magazine. Just a beautiful, beautiful book. The printing is just amazing. It's Taschen. So, I mean, their books are just made, they're just art books, really. Wow, look at that one. And just really brought to life. There's Seduction, That's Worth Them. Really, really nice. They've reproduced the covers for their comics. Amazing. All right, so again, this is the history of EC Comics, published by Taschen Books, massive volume. Oh, I'm so glad I have this book. Remember that in the description of this video, I will put links to other videos and references that covers in more detail this era. And even if you're not into comic books, I know you'll find this material interesting. For my take, the cover art during this period was unique and striking, meant to grab the reader's attention when walking by a newsstand or browsing a comics rack. These publishers pushed the envelope on showing graphic and gruesome depictions of horror and crime. Many of the stories were tales of morality, where the guilty are served a sort of poetic justice, but some were written and drawn for the shock value. I find myself drawn to the artwork, and the history of censorship of comics in the US is important to learn and acknowledge.
I, for one, do not believe, and never have believed, that comics are a cause of juvenile delinquency. I've taken this action based on a premise which has never been proven. However, I feel that the public must be served. If this is the way the public wants it, this is the way it'll have to be as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll be looking for any other pre-code horror or suspense comics that are out there, and hopefully I can get my hands on them and do another video like this. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like what you see on the channel. See ya.